Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmitty, Swanny and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right. Hi, guys. How are you?
Very well.
Hey, my beautiful friends.
What have you guys been up to?
Oh, what's your watch been up to, Clarky?
My watch just said hello as if it's my beautiful friend. I feel like I was talking to Schmitty and Swanny, not you, mate.
I don't understand how that function works, but my phone, my watch does that occasionally, and I'm so embarrassed. Sometimes it starts repeating what I've said, or it's trying to answer something. I think, oh God, stop! No, don't.
I don't understand,
know how to do it. No.
Or I have no answer for that.
Yeah,
I've heard it several times on this show where it just says, "I don't understand what you're asking."
I'm sure you've heard it many times on this show. I don't understand. I don't want to understand.
Has anyone got any news?
We are doing 10,000 steps a day for October, and it is the 4th of October, and we've done 10,000 steps every day. So we're 4 from 4.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
That's steps for me.
Yeah.
I'm doing about 500 at the moment, but I'm aiming to get a little bit higher as I build up my leg again.
Nice.
What do you have to do to get to 10,000 for you in your life? What would that involve? Yes.
Well, so this morning we've got a treadmill. So I got up in the dark and did 5,500. Then I went to work and did about 2,000 for the whole day at work. So then we had to come home and do laps of the paddock to try to get up to 10,000. So, it's good.
Oh, that is good. There you go.
Yeah. Anyone else got any news?
I went up to the houseboat for the first time in a long time because of the surgery. And I walked up the ladder a few times.
Ooh.
And I've been stiff and sore for 2 days as a result. And my physio came in today and I said, I went up the ladder a bit. And she was like, And I said, I figured if I can, I should. Or, like if I can, if my body says it's okay. She's like, yeah, but that's why you're sore. I was like, all right. But that was good. What about you, Swanny? School holidays, your favourite time of the year?
Well, it is when you've got fun stuff on, but this is a bit of a nothing holiday, so I'm struggling a little bit. And, no news.
You should teach the kids to sing that Christmas song. It's the most wonderful time of the year.
We've
that
already
could be
got
like
to
your
a point where we're just
holiday
avoiding
thing.
each other. We're basically just avoiding each other. I'm trying to avoid them.
And how far into school holidays are you?
Well, it's a short one, but it feels long. Like when they say 2 weeks, it's more than 2 weeks because they finish a little bit early and they don't go back until sort of like, Tuesday and Wednesday next week. So I've still got them for like another week, and I didn't handle this one very well. I think I was still riding high on last holiday, and I probably should have gone east and organised that early enough to go and see our family, but I just didn't. So it hasn't really played out so well. And
I think congratulations that you haven't murdered anyone yet.
Well,
so,
we're still
give
not
yourself
quite
a pat
there.
on the back.
So far.
That's right. Yeah.
That is something to be proud of. We should introduce ourselves. And so I'm Schmitty.
I'm Swanny.
And I'm Clarkey. And together we are Trial by Wine. Speaking of which, my wine's nearly empty. Goodness, that happened.
And you're having a
top up
delicious drink, aren't you? You're having a rosé.
We're having a Pizzini Rosetta Sangiovese Nebbiolo Rosé, or as we like to call it because we're classy, a rose, darling.
I thought you were going to shorten it because it had so many names. I thought it was going to be like a RSJ or I don't even know. What did you say it was?
Yes. It's
a
Sangiovese Nebbiolo Rosé, but they call it Rosetta.
SNR.
We call it Rose. What about everyone else?
I don't know how to say it, Carla. How's your French? Would that be
Dupré? I can't read it.
Duperry or Duperry?
Dupré or something.
Or Duperé.
Dupré.
Anyway, some French it's actually a French champagne rosé, which I bought for the occasion of our anniversary.
Oh.
When's that?
There you go. It's today.
Oh, yeah.
Woohoo!
For anyone who missed it on our socials.
Yeah, get on our socials and you can see us toasting our great brilliance ourselves.
If you were going to get on our socials, where would you go, Schmitty?
You go to Trial by Wine on Facebook. You can also find us at Trial by Wine Podcast on Twitter. And, of course, you can email us at trialbywine@gmail.com.
Thanks for the reminder.
Seamless.
I'm on it now. I'm going to get on that.
Oh.
And Swanny, what have you got today? What are you drinking?
Oh, well, I've had a couple of bubbles for our anniversary. And at the moment, I'm just having a nice sparkling water to cleanse my palate and keep my throat moisturized while we start my story.
All right. Well, without any further ado,
Shall we?
what have you got for us today?
Okay,
Yep.
well, I was going down a slightly different avenue, and when I remembered that it was our anniversary, I thought, oh, the other one was quite macabre, and I thought I might just park that for another time, and I might get something else that might, raise a smile a little bit more. So hopefully,
Like celebratory murders? Is this what?
a little bit like that. Of course,
Anniversary
there's something
murders.
involved. It's not all shits and giggles. Something dire does happen, but the framing around all of it, I really got a tickle out of. So hopefully everybody will enjoy some of that as well, because I did enjoy that aspect of it. There's a little bit of a backstory.
Well,
So
I'm
without
intrigued.
further ado, can I introduce you to a chap whose name, very frustratingly, I've seen it referred to many different ways. So what I will end up doing is just starting to call him by his first name so that I don't say his surname incorrectly. But we're going to meet a chap called Bernie Tiede, which is also known as TD. And the reason is it's spelled Tiede. TD? Tiede?
Oh,
Radio.
tidy?
Tidy. Tiede is the way I say it, but I've also heard it pronounced Tiede. So
TDS.
TD is what it should be. I think it's a foreign name.
It's a German name, I'd say.
Correct. That's absolutely right. And they would say,
And that's
TD.
why it is T, because when your
D.
E follows the I in German, you say it as an E
So it's
sound.
TD. Yeah, I think you're right. So when I was listening, I'll tell you,
Yes.
it'll make sense why other people are calling it Tiede later on because of where it
And is
ends
the us silent after TD?
up.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes, it is.
Okay.
I'll tell you my sources
why
because
not?
that might give you a little bit of a insight as to
Lad Bible.
No Lad Bible.
Oh.
It's been ages since we've had
Or
Lad
the
Bible.
Smithsonian. I didn't check that either.
Oh,
Encyclopedia
top of the range, bottom
Britannica.
of the range.
But where I found this story was a website called ranker.com.
What?
Ranker. R-A-N-K-E.
Not wanker.
I
Ranker.com.
was going to say, I don't recall seeing that there. I didn't know they were into true crime.
And then I found other references, ABC News, Crime Vault website, and some of my favourites are Dr. Todd Grande, which is I guess what's it called if it's a podcast if you can see it?
A blog.
Is it?
A vlog.
A vlog.
You
A
mean
vlog.
read it?
A vlog.
Yeah, blog. Yeah.
And
Not a
then
flog.
Variety. So that should
Is that a
throw a bit of it.
source?
It is. As is also the IMDb, the International Movie Database. Okay, and then I'll also be using Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is the best source for this story in terms of a timeline. So I will reference it quite a lot.
The old putting it in
Because that's the
in
hardest
a proper
part,
timeline,
right?
yeah.
And this is sort of,
Yeah.
the timeline's quite important. So I can give you all the colour and whatever else, but I will need to reference Wikipedia in terms of how it all played out. Okay, so let's start with Bernie Tiede and where he was born. So he was born on August 2, 1958 in Tyler, Texas. And he was the son of Bernard Tiede, because he's Bernard Tiede too, remember? Who was a native of Volyn Oblast in the Ukraine, and he was of German descent. So there you're right, Schmitty, you got it already. And then,
Nailed it.
so his father, Bernard Tiede, had immigrated in 1926 as a child with his family to the United States. The elder Tiede had served as a professor of music and choral director at Our Lady of the Lake College in San Antonio, Texas, at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, and at Kilgore College in Kilgore, and then McMurray College in Abilene, where he served as director of the McMurray Chanters until his death. So a very musical family. They're at their very heart that's what their dad's profession is, and it's certainly probably a big part of their life as well. In addition to his work at the university as a university professor, the elder Tiede also served as church music director and a vocal performer. Bernie Tiede's mother was his father's first wife, and her name was Lela Mae Jessup.
Mother.
Yep.
Got it?
So we've got
Right, okay.
Bernie Tiede, Bernie
Was just
Tiede the
his
second.
mother.
Yeah, just so our
Yeah.
hero, whatever else, his
Yes.
mother, had been married to the professor of music.
I was trying to plot that out on a mental whiteboard until I realised it actually wasn't
got the same
complicated
name.
at all.
No.
I was like, oh.
Well, I should
No,
have said Bernie
exactly,
Tiede
yeah.
the second's mother. There you go. They had married in 1957, and Bernie was born the next year in Abilene, Texas. However, Jester was killed in an automobile accident when the boy was just 2 years old. So he lost
Who's
his
Jester?
mum. The
Is
mum.
that his mum?
His mother. Yeah.
So he lost his mum very
Correct.
early on.
Just checking.
No problem. In 1963, the father married Clara Catherine Wiley, who became his stepmother, and I believe they had another child. His father died in Abilene when he was 15, and at that point he was left with his stepmother and little sister. So he graduated from high school in 1976, and he took a job around this time in a local funeral home to help support his stepmama and his sister. And he quite liked it by all accounts, and he'd drive the hearse around town, and he was, you know,
Into it.
He was into it.
Was he into it?
No, he wasn't. No, not like that.
Oh, okay.
This is what's
All right,
really
good.
quite unusual about this story is he really wasn't into it I don't think in a particularly macabre way.
That's Clarky's alarm bell going off.
Yeah. That is absolutely ringing alarm bells for me. Anyone who has fun working in a funeral home.
Well, I think that he kind of enjoyed it, and it sort of played to some of the things that they'd had in their upbringing, which was the church and music.
Death.
And
And
to be
music.
honest, it was
Ritual.
correct. And so what happened was he discovered that he I wouldn't say enjoyed it, but he did enjoy it. He was good at it. So he went and studied. And he went to mortuary school.
Like was good at it, and so got some level of satisfaction out of it, as opposed
totally.
Just
to
enjoying
enjoying it.
No, not enjoy. It was more like
not sexually.
Not at all. It was a career path. And
Right.
And death and taxes. You're always going to have work if you work in.
And I think that
in,
he
mortuaries.
I will go on to this, but he did it because he enjoyed it. He did it because he was good at it. And I think that there was a connection between his upbringing and certainly the musical side of it. I don't think many of us think of funerals in that respect, but in Texas, if you're having a funeral and you're going to a funeral home, there's lots of singing, and it's got a lot to do with worship and church. It's not just about a funeral, a lot of these things came together. So his musical background played into it. And I think that he would not only be able to respect people who had passed, he was able to bring this beautiful sort of joy of his love of music into his treatment of people, and then also how he then worked within the funeral home.
Is it true that he used to like to dress up as Cher and sing "If I Could Turn Back Time"?
Well, I'd have to say no, but maybe.
Okay.
But when I get on further, perhaps.
Disco Inferno?
No, that
Burn,
definitely not.
burn, baby, burn. Any of those?
Only for the cremation.
Yeah, that's right.
So we then we move our story sort of from where he'd sort of grown up in Texas to a town called Carthage, and it has been described as one of the best small towns in Texas, and it's in East Texas, and by all accounts, it is one of those little towns that it feels like everybody knows everybody's business. And when he came to the town, he was employed by the Hawthorne Funeral Home. And the director of the funeral home there, I think he must have put out a job application, or not a job application, what do you call it? It's a job.
An ad?
Yeah, an ad for a job. And Bernie had replied, and he said, I thought that he would be okay. But he said, I cannot believe how good he was at his job. Anyway, so he came across to Carthage, and he became assistant funeral director at the Hawthorne Funeral Home. Truthfully, once he got there, he became a real star of the local community because everybody knows somebody who's died, and I think there probably weren't too many funeral homes. I don't know if there was any other funeral homes. There was certainly this one. And
Did he branch out into live shows or anything?
No, but it was a sort of the best
star?
the best way I can describe it. It's like a full
where that question came from.
It's a full service kind of experience, and that's something that I wasn't really able to get my head around.
He does get too involved in his job if he's giving full service.
So what he did was when he got to the funeral home, the director has said he brought this sort of panache to funerals and the way people mourned, and he was able to make people really feel like they were part of something that was beautiful. And what's important is he started, he would collect the bodies from somebody's home to start with. So let's say that's his first point of contact. So he's going and meeting quite often, a widow or whatever. He takes the body with respect to the funeral home. And once he's there, he's the person who, I think the word's embalmed, is it, when he gets the bodies ready?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
he would do their makeup. And I've seen a piece where it shows him and talking about how he has all of these things, and everything's all about giving dignity to the body. And so that when the mourners see the body, it is a positive experience. You know, he said it didn't matter if someone had been hit by a car or they'd died of natural causes or they'd choked on a piece of meat or whatever. He was able to put them back together and give them, you know, a bit of a glow up, I think is what they currently say. I think the young kids.
Did he look like Bob Down?
No, he did not look like Bob Down. He
That's
was
what
sort
I'm
of a
envisaging.
short, sort of heavy-set gentleman, and he
Danny DeVito?
not that short. But so imagine that he's taken the body, he's then got the body ready for the funeral itself, and then during the funeral, he not only oversees the ceremony, but then he quite often performs as well, and he sings. So he's got a beautiful voice, and so all of these people in this small Texas town think he's a beautiful man who is looking after their dead and giving great dignity and respect and an uplifting sort of service. And it was said at this point that he was a darling among the, I think they called them the Delols, which was the dirty, I can't believe I said that. I cannot believe I said that.
Oh, no.
I can't believe I said that.
What does it really stand for?
Darling little old ladies.
Oh, dirty little old ladies.
Oh my God, I can't
Well,
believe
it was probably, you know, well loved amongst the dirty little old ladies as well as the darling little
I
old ladies.
cannot believe I said that. I mean, I remember writing the note down. I remember going D, and then I thought, what did that stand for again? Darling little old ladies, not dirty little old ladies.
I'm glad you did that, though, because I'm struggling to take this seriously so far.
Yeah.
It all just seems like a pantomime or something.
It does feel a bit like that. And I think that's what attracted me to it, because one thing to note at this point is after he's finished school, after he's finished studies and he's then arrived, at this point he's sort of in his late 20s, early 30s when he's working at the funeral home in Carthage. And when I'm talking about the darling little old ladies, even the dirty ones, we're talking about elderly ladies. We're not talking middle age. We're talking about that set who, you know, to be fair, we've been to quite a few funerals this year, but it becomes their social life in some respects. When you get to a certain age, you are going to more funerals than you're going to weddings, christenings, or whatever else, other sort of life events. And so they're starting to see Bernie more often. You know, he's a figurative part of their life. And then to add to that, Bernie just starts to become part of the fabric of society, and he's so highly regarded because of what he does. And then he's also helping young people at Scouts.
Tell me he starts branching out into christenings and weddings and stuff, and he's just doing, wherever there's a celebration, Bernie's there.
Well, he doesn't quite need to do that, but he certainly he plays a role. When I say this, but I know that the penny will drop, but he's big in the musical theatre scene within town as well.
Yes, I think you're trying to say he's gay.
Well, I'm not
right?
trying to say he's gay, but he's not gay.
What do you mean he's not gay? Of course he's gay.
He's never...
we don't know his sexuality.
He never
but
comes
he
out...
certainly likes musical theatre and little old ladies, and it's a little bit flamboyant.
He's a little...
Hello!
He's
a little bit Bob Down.
Well, it's very interesting because for a little Texas town, about the sort of most... And when I say incriminating, I don't mean incriminating in like it's a bad thing, but about the most bold thing that anyone was sort of said was that he was effeminate, but they didn't think that he was necessarily gay. And he was...
Join the dots, for God's sake.
Yes, but...
I'll read between the lines.
He was so involved in helping people and musical
That is
theatre.
exactly what I'm envisaging.
Yes. Well, you're doing him a favour.
He's a little bit shorter,
a little bit more. He does have a moustache.
Oh, is that better?
Right.
Oh, Bob Down. Yes, I can see it. No, he doesn't look like that.
No, he doesn't.
He's a little heavy set, sort of little moustache man. And he's just a darling, really. And he's really looked upon with great sort of, I'm not sure of admiration, but, you know, people with great kind of affection. That's the word I'm after. By all corners of the society. And I did see that there was like one reference to it. It said, you know, that also closeted people were quite a fan, but I couldn't then find any proof of any of that. It's really weird. It paints a picture, but there's nothing concrete to say that he was. It was just some of the things that were his hobbies and his interests were very effeminate. So we've got Bernie, who's very busy keeping the dead company and certainly looking after the mourners at the funeral home in Carthage, Hawthorne Funeral Home in Carthage, Texas. In 1990, he meets a lady called Marjorie Nugent. And Marjorie has just lost her husband, and I think he just died of natural causes, to be honest. They don't really go into what happened to poor Mr. Nugent, but they meet at the Hawthorne Funeral Home because Mrs. Nugent is organising her husband's funeral. And we get to meet Mrs. Nugent because she and her husband were quite wealthy within the local community. And that was because he had been a successful, he was oil exploration. He'd made a lot of money in the 60s. And as I understood it, I didn't spend a lot of it. I think he invested it. So I think they were quite frugal. I don't think they lived I know they didn't live a particularly flamboyant life, but they had some hardcore cash behind them and assets, and they had stockbrokers and different people that ran their business interests. And it was also stated somewhere that at one point he had bought a bank in town. So it's
Bought a bank?
Bought a bank. It is possible. I know.
As you do.
Not the big four.
Not Bendigo Bank
Not
either.
the big four. No.
Did it come with all the money inside?
I would
That's
think
why
so.
it costs so much.
Probably. So he also had a bank, and I don't know if he had that for how long he had it for, but there's no record of it sort of going into the future, but at one point he did. So that will give you an idea. They did have some serious coin. Anyway, so Marjorie, however, was really the polar opposite of dear Bernie in the fact that nobody really liked Marjorie. Marjorie had the worst reputation in town just for being, I hate to use it, just a bitch. She was just mean. Yes, a slack-ass mole. She was. Her own family were like not fans. She just really and truly rubbed people the wrong way. She was not a nice person. She was mean in particular, and that really didn't sit comfortable with local folk. No one really cared for her. I think her husband people were quite fond of him. He was a straight talker, but she had this other sort of persona that people were just not interested and weren't buying into and not sort of happy to entertain, so she was very much on her own. So what Bernie did was, which apparently is what he did after all funerals, was he would follow up with the mourner or the widow or the widower. And he went to pay a visit to Marjorie. And the first time he turned up with flowers, he always did, and she, shut the door in his face. But he continued to go back and see her and bring her, sweets and bubble bath and little treats to, get her through this difficult time. And Marjorie then starts to let Bernie into her life because actually he was the only person who was nice to her. Yeah. He was
and he's a stalker.
Yeah, he was the only person who was nice to her.
Not him again. If you can't beat him, join him.
Yes.
All right, Bob Down, come on in.
So at this
wipe
point,
that ridiculous smile off your face.
What I do love, and this is really important to know, at this point, Marjorie is 75 and Bernie's 32. There's just a little age gap.
Yeah, the way you described him, I thought he was older.
No, this one, no, because I sort of
32.
said, 20s into his early 30s. I mean, he's young. I mean, I would say that at this point in my life, wouldn't he? That's so young. He's 32, she's 75. They start spending some time together. They go out for lunch, they play cards. And he spends a little bit more time at her home. And they actually do have quite a sweet relationship. And he starts to take her out. And because of his interest in musical theatre, he starts taking her to some of the productions that he's involved in. And she, for a time, seems slightly warmer. I have to say, she does seem a little bit less crabby old bitch and a bit more like, oh my goodness, someone younger and, full of joy and life and kindness is paying me attention, and there's a warmth to her at this point. And they do start to spend a considerable amount of time, and the people in town know, and they start to say that, Mrs. Nugent or Ms. Nugent has a companion in Bernie. And then they start to sort of up the ante a little bit, and they start travelling. And they go on a trip to Russia. They go to Acapulco.
Is she paying?
Oh, yeah. They have a trip to New York City, and they fly first class, and by all accounts, it's a very nice life that they're starting to live. And I think she sort of thinks, well, you know what? I'm not leaving it to my family. And she's quoted as saying that. I'm going to spend it. I'm going to spend it on who I like and how I like. So they start living.
But also, they've got plenty. She's got plenty of cash.
She's got plenty of cash. And I mean, she lives in a very, I wouldn't say it's necessarily modest, but, she doesn't live extravagantly.
Not mansioning it.
No,
not
extravagant. She just, they run a business. They're business people who have access to money, but, they work. She and her husband probably work very hard to have what they have and maintain it. And then Bernie comes along and there's a little bit of, I think her husband probably worked
Fun
full-time.
times.
Exactly. So
Let's go on a holiday. You're paying.
It sounds awesome to me, if you don't mind me saying. I wouldn't mind it. Imagine being 75, a bit of dosh, and a 32-year-old who doesn't want anything but just wants to hang out. I'm like,
It's not going to end
I'm up
well,
for
though,
it.
is it?
Probably not. This is trial by wine.
Yeah.
True.
No judgment so far.
No, things go quite well, and the two eventually become an inseparable companions, even though there's sort of 40 odd years in between them. So in 1991, so remember they only met in 1990. In 1991, Nugent alters her will, and she disinherits her only child, who is a chap by the name of Rod Nugent. And I know that he's a doctor, but they call him something. What do they call it if you're a doctor in America? I can't remember. Anyway, so he's got his own money, and she sort of says, like, these people have nothing to do with me anyway, and he and his family are fine, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm disinheriting him. But then she chooses to leave her entire $10 million estate to Bernie Tiede.
He's dead. Ooh. Right there.
I don't know
that 10 million is a death sentence. I'm calling it now. I'm getting in early.
So at this point, quite early on, Bernie's still working at the funeral house. I don't know where I got the word parlour from. All of a sudden, I've come over all American. A funeral parlour.
Yeah, funeral parlour.
I've come over all southern.
He should start planning his own funeral, I reckon.
Funeral home?
He's a
Well, at the funeral home, he would sell people their coffins. So like they'd come in, he'd be doing like this sort of sales spiel, like, we could, would you like this? Would you like this? Oh, I think you won't fit in this. This would be way more comfortable. And then the head of the funeral home was saying that he had a couple of flourishes that he'd added, and it meant that for every funeral that he did, if you wanted a dove release, that they could charge people an extra $150, little things like that. But it was literally from the time he took the body to doing hair and makeup and prepping them to singing at the funeral, selling them the caskets. It was a big
I bet he did.
business.
What year was it? 90.
90.
I bet he was doing those early DVD slideshows, PowerPoints.
Probably.
I reckon he's got 3 months left. He's a goner.
By about 1993, so a couple of years in, more than 3 months, she convinces him to leave his job at the funeral home and work and be her full-time companion. So what in terms of work, he starts calling the stockbroker on her behalf and starts doing that. And people are some feathers are ruffled certainly at this point. And, the stockbroker's saying, I'm not dealing with you. Like, put Marjorie on the line. Then Marjorie's like, if you don't speak to Bernie, then I'll change stockbrokers. And obviously she's probably one of the biggest clients he's got. So they all bow down and kowtow to dear old Marjorie. But their relationship sort of shifts. There's less of the sort of holidays and grandiose things of the earlier days. And now it feels like she really is becoming much more possessive of him and having him do more menial kind of things. So
controlling him.
Yeah, she's controlling. She's allowing.
Isolated him from his job for a start,
exactly.
Which he loves.
But there's it's sort of double-edged sword.
Coercive control.
But she does allow him access to money. So
but that's part of the coercive control. Is like if you shit me off, I'll cut you off from that money. So
So that's very much the dynamic that starts to evolve, where you see that he's gone and bought himself a small plane. And he's gone and got himself a license.
What?
It seems a very small plane. But
of all things,
it seems quite. Honestly, I'm researching another story, and that's exactly what the guy did when he came into some money. I don't know what it is. I'm like, go and buy myself a plane.
It's a fair escape plan, though, if you are under coercive control, to just buy yourself a plane.
You would think so, wouldn't you? But it plays out that he has to be available to her when she needs him. Quickly come here now. He has to clean the house. And she gets rid of other people in the process, so that she becomes totally reliant on him. But then, you need to be here. And then if he was flying and she tried to contact him and he was unavailable to take a call. So then she said, right, well, you'll have to have a pager because when I need you, I need you. And it became very unhealthy and
sick,
really, she was being really mean to him as well. Poor Bernie.
Poor Bernie didn't deserve that.
Poor Bernie. All that for what? $10 million? I don't know what he got to do for $10 million. I don't know.
He was a hoot at a funeral.
I think some people locally were a little bit concerned, but not overly. I mean, he was still out and about doing what he could do, and he would do things like he was still in his shows and she just wouldn't turn up to them anymore. So he was trying to do that, and there was sort of this idea that he'd be rehearsing and then she'd call and he'd have to say, I've got to go. So they were aware that she was very much manipulating him heavily. And people weren't quite aware of what else was going on. But at this point, things sort of take a turn for the worst, shall we say. And in November 1996, so this is 6 years after her husband has passed, and they've sort of come together, Tiede killed Nugent.
I thought he was going to die, but
Yeah,
she
didn't
did.
see that coming,
I
did ya?
didn't.
No.
Yes.
He did it by shooting
Take
her in
that,
the back
bitch.
4 times with a .22 caliber rifle. Now, I don't
my
understand much about rifles,
The old 22,
but I
right?
think that
Yep.
the reason they had the rifle, and besides the fact that they were all armed all the time, was because they had an armadillo problem, and she had him
Yep.
shooting armadillos in their front garden. That was
course
one of
she
his
did.
jobs. And she said, you are totally responsible for the
Armadillos
state
are
of this
poor
garden.
armadillos.
I know.
Yeah, so they would have it was the armadillo gun.
Doesn't she know they've got armor and they're bulletproof?
Well, this obviously did some damage or certainly scared them off because that was the armadillo gun. So what happens is they walk into the garage of the house and the pretense is that she had been giving him a hard time. And then something just snaps and he sees the gun. She's walking to the car, they're heading out, and he shoots her 4 times in the back and she dies. And so then he places her body in the freezer of the garage. Like, we talk about the big cold for
The old
shed freezer.
freezer,
I was
yep.
talking about it just the other day.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he makes no attempt at trying to really hide the body or dispose of it. And as someone pointed out, he had access to an airplane. If he really wanted to get rid of her, he could have flown her out over the Gulf and
funeral
dumped
parlour.
her.
He could have just
There are a number of things that he really could have done.
rolled her in, cremated her when no one was
But
looking.
he didn't. So that was in November of 1996.
He didn't mean to kill her, though, did he?
What?
Like,
yeah, he did.
Yes, he shot her, but it wasn't premeditated. As
I
you
don't
say,
think
it was a
so.
snap
Well,
thing.
no, I don't. And that will come to bear whether or not it was.
I think
Okay.
I don't think it was.
I reckon he meant to kill her. Not premeditated way, but just right. I'm fucked up.
I'm done. I'm done.
You ask me to clean one more fucking spilt red wine and you're dead.
It was things like, cutting her fingernails and like really just, like being
The
nearly
things
servant
you have
like-
to do for older people.
Yeah,
that's
correct.
right.
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't know that he signed up for it as a carer.
No.
He would have started with, oh, this is fun. We're going on holidays and we're companions. But then it moved into a carer role because she forced him to be the person
Yeah.
that she relied on.
Okay, so Bernie just sort of goes about business. He doesn't go and tell anyone, oh, I've shot Mrs. Nugent. He just
Whoopsies.
carries on. And in
He
actual
wrote a
fact,
musical about
he
it,
becomes
and then he directed
even
it.
more generous and more kind in some ways. And what he starts to do is he starts using her money to help others in the community. Like, he's always done that. And they would say, like, he was a bit of a buyer. One of the examples they say is he drove a really beat up old car around, and that beat up old car had finance on it. Like, so he owed money, he had debt. And it wasn't like he ever spent money on himself. He'd go and give it to other people in the community. So for instance, the church needed a new wing and he was, always promoting, like, putting money into that. And then he purchased a really expensive over-the-top coffee house, I think that's what you call it, like with a slide, not a tree house, but like a really grandiose sort of like outstanding little house. Playhouse, that's it, with a slide for someone's daughter. Like, he was always buying things for people, but he also spent a lot of money sort of civically. So he had given money for academic prizes. I think he'd paid, this must have cost a fortune. I do find this a bit odd. He'd paid for the choir to go to Russia, I think at the local school. He was giving money to friends, giving money to civic groups, giving money to the church, but not always just money, helping as well and doing stuff. So he just kind of upped the ante on that, and people just thought he was the best. Oh gosh, Bernie could do no wrong.
I wonder what Marjorie says about that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that sort of plays out for a period of about 9 months. And then in August of 1997, her friends, and probably with the help of the stockbroker, I think they have really want an answer. They haven't obviously spoken to Marjorie for some time. And it wasn't that they ever did, the family, right? They weren't really in contact with her, but the stockbroker was. And the stockbroker was sort of getting the runaround from Bernie. So at first, Bernie didn't answer the phone for a number of weeks. And then by the time he finally spoke to the stockbroker, he was like, oh, I didn't want to tell you this, but Marjorie's had a couple of minor strokes. She's sitting here with me, but she can't communicate. She's saying hi. So that he was able to hold off for quite a while.
Is she still in the freezer?
Yeah, she's still in the freezer, in amongst the frozen vegetables.
What's the use-by date on a body in the freezer?
I don't know. I guess it depends if it gets freezer burn or not, really, isn't it? You don't want to have things in there for too
You're
long.
not gonna eat it.
And probably depends what you're going to do with it, yeah.
Some people might eat it, but if you're not going to eat it, freezer burn doesn't really matter.
I just
That's
feel
true.
like...
A wedding cake lasts for a long time, doesn't it?
I feel like you'd take it out before 9 months.
I mean,
Why?
well, because if you ever had to get anything else out of her, you'd go, fuck, there she is again.
Yeah, well, they've got the veggies in there.
Yeah, well, so,
Should be
I'd
calling her
probably
that.
stop eating veggies so I didn't have to go into the freezer with
I wouldn't go into
her
the freezer.
body in it. No, that's like, get rid of it.
Well, yes. He does say later that he wanted to give her a proper burial. And that doesn't surprise me because people were saying to him,
But 9 months.
I don't know, he said at this point.
God. He used to work in the industry, doesn't he? Know
He's got
people?
it's standards. You think so. I don't know why he doesn't deal with it any earlier, but I mean, I guess it's kind of like he knows he's going to get caught. I don't
It's
know.
a rookie error, yeah. He doesn't care. He
I
just
don't
wants to
think-
blow
yeah.
some cash.
So the stockbroker and the son approach the
The
house.
stockbroker and the son. That sounds
Yeah.
like a movie.
So they've grown concerned. They're like, okay, we're not buying his stories anymore. Let's go and check out. So they arrive at the house, and Rod has declared the son has declared his mother a missing person. And so he and his daughter turn up at the house in August of 1997, and he had murdered her in November of 96. And that's when they search the house, and then they go to the freezer, and the freezer's actually taped up. So they think, what's going on here? Like, and they find
he's
hidden-
an idiot.
hidden under the vegetables.
Oh, we all know that you bury the body in the backyard and then plant endangered species over the top so no one can dig it up.
That's right.
Is that right, Schmitty?
That's right.
I was looking at Schmitty there for confirmation because she would
Yeah.
know. Is that correct?
That was something on Facebook.
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
it?
I think I tagged you both
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that
yeah.
on Facebook. Yeah.
So, obviously, suspect number one was Bernie, and he was taken in for question pretty much immediately.
I've been wondering where she was. She must have just fallen into the freezer.
Is that where she
Yeah.
went?
He admitted to her murder immediately. He had said that after the murder, he had prepared the body and placed it in the freezer. And the reason he was doing that was because he always wanted to give her a proper farewell and burial.
When you say prepared the body,
I don't know what he would have had
tell me more
access to.
about that.
Well, I don't have more access to more details about that because I think the point that, oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of you, but what his version of preparing a body would be obviously much more intricate than anybody, like some amateur or, some Joe Blogs, right? So I don't... Us, yes. Well, not you, because you would know, but Clarkie and I, if we had to prepare a body, we'd have no idea. We'd probably give you a call.
Like,
Schmitty,
that's right.
I've got this body here. What would you suggest I do in this
Bit of lip
situation?
piece.
What has worked for you in the past?
Eyelash
Exactly.
extensions.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking, like, if I'm going to put meat in the freezer and I want to prepare it, I might cut it up, like
Put it in
so
small bags.
We have tandoori chicken as one of our meals, and so sometimes I'll get the chicken breasts and I'll cut it up into strips, and then I'll marinate it in tandoori spices, and then put it in the freezer like that. So it's prepared so that when we go to eat it, we just have to defrost it and cook it. I don't understand how he's preparing the body in this, because he's not going to have a viewing. What are you doing, mate? Are you cutting it up
it was
so
just
it
the
fits?
ritual for him.
I don't know
Maybe it
what
was a calming
I don't know what
ritual,
tools.
so-
I'm assuming he didn't take the body. I don't know though. There's nothing.
I just think he's cut it
take
into
it there and
foot-long
brought it back.
bits.
No, she was one piece. She was
That's one
frozen
piece.
like a popsicle.
In a freezer?
But,
Yeah.
yeah.
Big box freezer.
Big box,
Like
chest freezer.
in the
Little old
fetal
lady.
position or something?
Dirty little old lady. No, little
Yeah.
doll.
I don't think he prepared her very well if she's in that
She was
position.
81 at this point. She would have probably been quite a little lady unless she was like a big
Yeah, but
little
also
lady.
stuffed pretty well. Like, imagine if he's going to present her and she's in that squashed up position, comes out frozen. You can't then stretch that out and straighten her out.
Well, I think if you defrosted her, she'd go all mushy. I think there is a thing that if
But that's what I'm
bodies
saying
are
is...
frozen for too long, when they defrost, they go...
But putting
Oh.
makeup and stuff on is not preparing her for anything, because she's going to
But
be an
I don't
absolute
know that
train
he did
smash on
that.
the other side. But
We don't know what he was preparing her
But that's
for.
I
my
don't
question,
know.
right?
Yeah.
What did he do to prepare her? Did he put her in tandoori spices for
Maybe.
a
for
meal
future
later?
meals, yeah.
I
I
think
don't
so.
know, and I think the preparation would have been somewhat basic because I don't think that he wouldn't have had the tools at her house. And I
Bernie,
don't
what are
think-
you having for dinner? I'm having tandoori delo.
Marjorie. Marjorie
Maybe just cleaned the wounds
Yeah.
and got rid of the blood and changed her outfit and put some makeup on her and then popped her in the freezer.
That sounds all
Yeah.
too
Just to give her a little bit of dignity.
Just that's how
maybe.
you
That's
would do it. I know, but
And also,
that's
as you know, when
personal.
people die, they can actually defecate themselves or urinate
Or get a
as the
prolapse.
muscles relax. So it's quite possible that he cleaned
that's
all
the
of that
shits
up.
part of the shits and giggles that you've
That's
had
right.
with this story.
Tick, tick, tick.
Yeah.
So the cleaning up the preparing her might have been to do with cleaning her
No.
up and giving her dignity in the freezer.
No, that's washing.
I don't know. I
I'm
surmise.
still unsure. I'm going to ask him.
I don't know what preparation he did. I would imagine it would be very limited, but I think it was probably, as Smitty said, just making sure that he tidied her up before he froze her. So he's brought in, he admits that he has murdered her, and he said that after the murder, he had prepared the body and placed her in the freezer. After this, Tiede acknowledged using Nugent's money for civic activities, gifts to academic and civic groups, and to friends. She had given him power of attorney over her funds, so he was certainly able to
his
do
money then?
It's sort of kosher.
Yeah. Except she was dead.
Except that he'd murdered
Yeah.
her.
Apart from that, yeah.
It's small fact.
So you're
Everything
going,
else is fine.
So you're going to
Yeah.
think at this point that I'm racing ahead, but I'm not. A jury
Ooh.
convicted Tiede of first-degree murder, and he was
Are you racing
him,
ahead?
and sentenced him to 50 years in prison.
What?
Jeez,
50
that's a bit
years?
harsh.
Yeah. Well,
Why?
He'd murdered someone.
Well, it is murder.
Yeah.
Of one
It's like he
person?
didn't get life.
He could have got 4 to 22 years or whatever we've seen in the past.
And then just move state and get it a lesser sentence. Get it in 6
Depends
months.
where it is. Yeah, it depends the state
Jesus.
that it's
Well,
in.
he should have flown that plane to a state that was more lenient before he shot her.
But Swanny's about to tell us more.
And this is where I got excited, right? So
Ooh.
Right.
he's gone off to jail, and you might be wondering where the International Movie Database and Variety come into it.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that
This is where they come
a
into
film
it.
was made.
Correct.
Mm.
After the film Bernie was released in 2011,
Really not to be mistaken with Weekend
Remind
at
me who
Bernie's.
played Bernie.
I will tell you. I'm about to tell you who played everybody, but I'll just tell you why it's important. After the film Bernie was released in 2011, attorney Jodie Cole became interested in Tiede's case and met with him, filing a post-conviction writ of habeas corpus in which Tiede alleged his constitutional rights were violated in the first trial because of newly discovered evidence. He further alleged in the writ that the 81-year-old Nugent was controlling and emotionally abusive towards him, and that he had murdered her in a dissociative state, resulting from years of sexual abuse as a child by an uncle.
What?
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, well, that's a stretch.
Yeah, didn't see that coming.
So would you like to know about the movie Bernie?
Yes, please.
Because I have watched it.
Oh,
Who? Now you're thinking that Bob Down would play the character of...
yes, totally.
You are far off. Bob
As
Down did not play
usual.
him. Jack Black.
That's it.
Oh.
Jack Black
Bernie, yes.
plays
I've
Bernie.
Yeah, right.
Now remember,
I've seen it years ago. It came back to me when you were
Yes.
telling the story.
And
I
Jack
thought, I think
Black,
I've seen this.
you may or may
Yeah.
not recall, you probably remember him from like School of Rock and movies like Can Sing, right? He's a portly
Yes,
little
he
guy.
can, yes.
He's got this, he can be really cute and,
Didn't he sing that
kind.
song about the devil?
Yeah. That's his band, Tenacious D.
Tenacious-
The
that's it.
the song that the greatest
Something
song that
about-
ever was.
That's
or
right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he plays.
He also was in The Holiday, the film The Holiday, and he plays a songwriter in that, and he does this whole. He's going through all the soundtracks and all the little musical riffs, and he's explaining to Kate Winslet, I think it is, and he does this one about driving Miss Daisy, I think it is. He's just like frootin' dootin' doo brootin' dootin' doo boo boopin' boopin' boo doo 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 doo. So cute.
That is totally
Anyway,
him.
yes, Jack Black, very cute.
Yeah. So, you could imagine Jack with a little moustache and, little thing, cute, kind, sings like an angel,
Our little Bernie.
lots of flourishes. So that's our little Bernie. Any ideas on who might have played Mrs. Nugent? Cranky old bird.
Now you
Olympia
Olympia
Dukakis.
Dukakis.
Oh, good choice.
close. Go the other one.
Oh, what's her name in Steel Magnolias?
That's
Yeah,
right.
you're close. You're so
I'm not
close.
crazy. I've just been angry for 24
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
Yes,
What's her name?
Weezer.
Yes.
Weezer, yeah,
Weezer.
Shirley MacLaine.
Shirley
Shirley
MacLaine.
MacLaine.
And in hindsight, I think Betty White was robbed. She should have played that
she's
part.
not angry enough.
She's not angry
She's
enough.
hilarious.
Oh, she can do angry.
And then there's three main characters. There's the part of the district attorney, and think of someone who was also, he's Texan, and this
Matthew
one's
McConaughey.
Yes, is that the only person you know? How'd you get that?
Just
Texan.
because we like Matthew McConaughey. And
Well, there you go.
And he likes playing a lawyer.
He likes that
Yeah,
so well.
yeah.
I know, it feels like he's just playing himself as the lawyer.
Yeah.
Time to kill. Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, so this is a movie that was directed by Richard Linklater, and that's important because it comes up a little bit later. So this movie...
Because you link it in later.
Oh, later.
Link later.
Exactly.
Ba-da-ching.
So after the release of this film, can you believe it? And I've watched the film. I'm sure there are lots of films about other crimes that are committed that don't warrant this kind of response. It's as a result of the movie coming out and this attorney seeking, some more information, trying to work out what really has happened and what was Bernie's true motivation in killing Mrs. Nugent, that things take a change. The Texas Criminal Courts of Appeal approved the writ. According to Rod, I don't know what that is, Tiede had alienated Nugent from her family, friends, and business associates of her late husband.
Yeah.
So that's what the son was saying.
Oh, right.
I've confused you there, sorry. So it's two different bodies. So her family are now coming and saying, we want all her money and we want something terrible to happen to him. He's criminal. She alienated us from him. She took him away from us. And meanwhile, everybody else is saying that she's done that to him, right? Because she was the bad guy. So a lot of the local people are saying there was two very distinct camps. There were the camp that were totally pro Bernie, and these God-fearing people knew that he had murdered her. They knew that he'd said that he'd done it, but they were still like, go easy on him because he's a good person and she's pushed him to this point. That's, it's of her doing. It's not, he's just had enough. And then there were other people on the side that were like, oh, well, yeah, that's all well and good, but he still murdered her. So you get these two distinct camps. So the character played by Matthew McConaughey is District Attorney Danny Buck Davidson. When he was interviewed, he said the town of Carthage was split up in regards to the opinion of Tiede. Davidson recounted to the Longview News Journal, people remember Tiede as being real nice and doing nice things, and they'd like my office to go real easy on him. And then there's a group that wants no mercy. And
hang 'em hard.
What is really awesome about this film is actually just they do like sort of this interview style where they speak to all the locals, but clearly they're actors, whatever else. But the charm comes in the way Texans speak and their little sayings, and it's so southern. It is really tickled me because they're old people essentially, and they're all very adamant about their opinions, whichever way they are. And it's always wrapped in this lovely little nugget of a saying that is so southern that I find it charming. So it's a nice film, actually. Even though someone's murdered.
I thought it was a great film.
Yeah, it's sweet.
Even the way they handle the murder, it's not gruesome in any way.
No, not at all.
It's quite sudden. You're like, oh, okay. Yep.
So shortly after entering the Texas Department of Criminal Justice in 1999, this is when he'd first gone in, he'd been attacked by fellow inmates. But other than that, during his entire imprisonment, he was described, not unsurprisingly, as the model prisoner.
Was he attacked
He
for doing
taught
shit
health classes
theatre?
and participated in the prison's choir.
Impromptu?
Well, he was, I saw somewhere also he was teaching people how to
Interpretive
cook. He was
dance.
doing lots of he was just such a do-gooder and helping everybody be better versions of themselves.
He was everyone's friend.
Yeah, he's
Punch.
so bobbed down. Yeah, exactly right.
But things take an interesting turn. In May 2014, Davidson and a visiting judge, Diane DeVasto of Tyler, which is a place in Texas, allowed Tiede to be released from prison that month on a $10,000 bail after his attorney, Jody Cole, had learned that Tiede had been sexually abused as a child, I mentioned that before, for multiple years by an uncle. Cole theorised that Tiede shot Nugent while in a brief dissociative episode brought on by her abusive behaviour of him, a theory backed by forensic psychiatrist Richard Pesakoff. To quote Pesakoff, Mr. Tiede's ability to repress and compartmentalise the abusive events from childhood and adolescence was ultimately overwhelmed by the repeated and extensive psychological abuse he suffered from Mrs. Nugent. The end result, his loss of control over his emotions and behaviour, is evidenced in his final actions towards Mrs. Nugent. So they're saying that because, all this trauma had happened to him as a child, she's pushed him too far, he's become, disassociated from what's really gone on, and he's shot her.
Not true.
It also has been suggested that Tiede's handwritten confession, a major factor in the murder being considered first degree, was strongly influenced by the prosecution's threat of leaking private videotapes of Tiede. Now, I can't find any reference to this anywhere, and so I don't know what those videotapes were of. I could take a wild guess. Schmitty might be close there based on that little hand movement. But there's no other reference, and certainly not in anything else that I've seen. So I can only go on what I'm reading here, and that's a reference from Wikipedia. When presented with the new evidence, Davidson agreed that he had known this information. Had he known this information in the original trial, he would have sought a lighter sentence. Interestingly, Nugent's family learned about Tiede's release through media reports. They weren't informed. Her granddaughter expressed shock that the release was granted and claimed that Richard Linklater's 2011 film, Bernie, had influenced the legal system. And I suspect she's probably right. Certainly by how it came about. There's no doubt that was sort of the starting point. The Nugent's family created a website to honour Nugent's memory, posting photos of her and articles relating to the murder. That said, they had been nowhere for years. At one point, there's reference in the movie that says that the granddaughter, had tried to sue their grandmother for money, and that had been 4 years before her death, and there'd never been another conversation. They'd made no contact with her. So when they were on, the witness stand or whatever else, and they were crying about finding her grandmother's body in the freezer, they were like, "But when was the last time you spoke to her? And weren't you suing her?" And they're not squeaky clean by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, but she was our grandmother. It's our choice to ignore her for 4 years. Yeah. Doesn't mean we're not sad that someone murdered her.
Now, this is interesting. Between the time of his release in 2014 and then he had a resentencing hearing in April 2016, Tiede resided in Austin, Texas, at what is known as a garage apartment of the filmmaker Richard Linklater. So Richard Linklater...
Is that a garage with an apartment up the top?
Yes, which is very common.
Like a mezzanine?
It's a very common thing in Texas.
Was Richard Linklater gay?
He wasn't even there, and I'll tell you how I know that. But it was a condition of his release. So it says here, this is where how I said that I use Variety as a source. Mm-hmm. The headline is Richard Linklater on Living with Bernie Tiede. Subhead: The Austin filmmaker opens up about his friendship with the now ex-con subject of his 2011 movie Bernie. And this is from 2014. And it reads, less than 2 months ago, a judge in Panola County, Texas, ordered the early release of Bernie Tiede, the now 55-year-old convicted murderer played by Jack Black in Richard Linklater's 2012 black comedy, Bernie. One of the conditions that Tiede lived in Linklater's garage apartment. It got reported strangely, the director admits. There were headlines like "Judge orders murderer to live with filmmaker." There were jokes immediately on the internet like Zodiac killer crashing Zodiac killer crashing at Finch's. Austin's kind of a garage apartment town, so it's not a big deal for me to let Bernie live there while he gets back on his feet, he continues. But it sounded almost as if the judge had said, "Okay, Austin liberal, you want to let him out? Well, fine, he's got to live with you." And this had come up also in the movie where they talk about how Texas is basically 5 states within a state. And, I think you probably heard of this, is at South by Southwest, there's like a festival that they hold in Austin. Austin is considered this like one little spot within all of Texas that is like much more liberal and quite cool. Then they talk about like the carcinogenic coast, which is like Houston, where the oil wells are. And then, Tex-Mex down closer to the Mexican border. So there's all these different areas, but that's what this reference is referring to, saying, the movie makers and they're so liberal and, if you want him out, then he's your responsibility. So,
But did the judge order him to stay there?
Well, yes. Yeah, it was part of the conditions.
Well, I feel like that's exactly what the judge said then.
It does say what didn't get reported immediately was the fact that Tiede's release marked the culmination of roughly a 2-year concerted effort by Linklater and others, chiefly Danny Buck Davidson, the district attorney who prosecuted Tiede for the 1996 murder of his 81-year-old companion, their goal to reduce his sentence. To reduce Tiede's sentence to serve time, 17 years, in light of new facts dug up by Jody Cole, a local attorney, who became intrigued by the case after seeing Bernie. So they weren't saying he hadn't done it. They were just saying, look, if we'd known all of these other things at the time of sentencing him originally, we wouldn't have gone
50 years there.
And that's Matthew McConaughey. We wouldn't have pushed so hard for, that. Yeah.
50 years was too long anyway.
A psychiatrist's report revealed that Tiede had experienced sexual abuse as a child, a detail that considerably impacted Davidson's view of the motive for the crime. The report said Tiede's history left him vulnerable to unhealthy relationships, bearing out the notion that Nugent's psychological hold on him had pushed him over the edge. Poor Bernie. Oh my God.
I know, right?
I know. That sounds lovely, but it wasn't quite to be. So the resentencing trial began in April 6, 2016. During the resentencing trial, Marjorie's granddaughter, Shannon Nugent, spoke directly to Bernie and stated, "You are nothing to me." I wouldn't think that had bothered him terribly. Shayna,
okay.
Shayna and her father, Roger.
Sorry, who are you?
You weren't. I never met you. Interestingly, when I was with your grandmother for 6 years. Yeah.
Actually, I'm $10 million richer than you.
The granddaughter and her father both asserted that Marjorie was a kind woman on good terms with her family, in contrast to the portrayal in the film, certainly, who Tiede conned in order to spend her fortune without her knowledge. Other witnesses' testimonies differed. For instance, Great County Commissioner Darryl Primo testified that in a conversation he had had with Marjorie between 91 and 96, she spoke favourably of Bernie's spending, as she proclaimed, "I'll spend every dime of my money before I leave it to my family." Merrill Rhodes, the victim's sister, recalled of Marjorie, "I was always afraid of her. I never forgot that she was my sister. I always loved her as a sister. Actually, even when she did ugly things, and she did." Merrill's son, John Rhodes, attested to the movie's accurate portrayal of his aunt. He noted several acts of his aunt's abusive behaviour towards him in a New York Times article titled, "How My Aunt Marge Ended Up in the Deep Freeze."
Oh, brilliant.
Oh,
Yeah.
my Lord.
Oh, sensitive.
Clickbait.
Absolutely. So you can
I would
find
totally click on that.
I've got all of this. It's sort of, they were all, called up to testify, and he'd already written the article about how much of an old witch she was. So that was, again, going against the son and the granddaughter. So the auntie and the nephews and that are saying, well, no, she was
wonderful.
more than a handful.
She
loved us. She was
would
so
have
kind.
happily left all of her money to us.
On April 22, 2016, the jury of 10 women, and 2 men issued a new sentence of 99 years or life for Tiede.
What?
Yeah, I know. After 3 weeks of testimony,
This is outrageous.
they had deliberated for just over 4 hours.
I don't understand.
No. Tiede resided in the Telford unit of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for at least 15 years. As of 2021, Tiede was incarcerated at John B. Connolly unit of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice in Kennedy, Texas. He is not eligible for parole until August 3, 2029, which will be a day after his 71st birthday, which I think is really sad.
That's an outrage.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. I know that I'm a little bit sort of enchanted by the film, but even before I'd watched it, I sort of thought, it just seemed like some of the crimes we look at, I just don't get the whole
people
numbers.
who get to have concurrent, like murder 3 people and have concurrent sentences and only actually get 30 years in total as a result of that.
2 to 22 years or whatever it is, where they get out after 2 years, even though they've been convicted of murder. So he went in 99, did you say, was when it was first?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So he's going to have at least 30 years in jail for killing Weezer.
Yeah.
Shocking. Do you think that because he left her in the freezer for 9 months, that played into?
Well, that would have worked against him.
Yeah. And I mean, certainly in the film,
particularly because she was marinated in tandoori spices.
But what Buck does in the first part is they move the trial away from Carthage to another jurisdiction because he's so light.
Prejudiced.
Yeah, he's so light. It's usually the opposite. He's so light, so they have to take it somewhere else. And they describe these people terribly as, rednecks with no brains and not, all that. So what Buck does at the time is he really leans heavily into the high life that he enjoyed with Marjorie when they were traveling. And, he says, you're a very cultured man and you like all these things and, you like going to the theatre and, really painting him as a bad person for being so very different to probably the people that he was standing in front of. But by the time it comes to the retrial and whatever else, you would have thought that they were able to focus more on his backstory. But I don't think that really played out so well for him either. So there you go. That is the story of Marjorie Nugent's death and her murder by the Mortician murderer, Bernie Tiede.
I think it's interesting, the timeline, though, because 99 versus 2014, attitudes around domestic abuse have changed
Massively.
significantly in that period.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So even if you'd brought in the psychological impact of this bloke having been sexually abused as a child in 99, may not have got anywhere with anyone. No sympathy, deaf ears. And this, this idea of a little old lady, how could she possibly be controlling him, etc. But then come forward 2014 when we're a bit more woke at the time, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's the victim. But that's almost like the tragedy of the whole thing. Then to get 99 years to life.
Are we more woke with domestic violence of women against men yet? I feel like that's still not properly being talked about.
I think we're more woke about people who, well, technically he murdered her, but he was a victim
because
of her
of the
abuse.
domestic. Yeah.
I think we absolutely are.
I think
we absolutely are. The first thing we talked about when this started was her coercive control.
Well, you did, but I think that if the genders were reversed, I think nowadays, and I mean 2022, not even 2014, we would be very empathetic towards the female for having had those things happen to her. If she had been abused by an uncle and had a male partner who was coercively controlling her, I think there would have been a lot of empathy. I think nowadays,
statistically,
I
don't think that's true.
No, well, I think nowadays 100% more than back then. So I think we're more aware of that now. I don't think we're doing a good job of it, but I think we're much more aware of it. I don't think the concept of men suffering domestic violence to women is very well understood. And I think it's probably in some ways still a little bit nonsensical to a lot of men particularly, but also some women.
Statistically, women who murder their partners after years of abuse, in terms of their prison sentence, they don't get off light at all.
No, I know. Yeah, but that's a lot of history. There's been instances we've discussed where it's not even illegal to do that. Sorry, for a man to kill the woman.
For a man to kill his wife.
Correct.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
But when a woman kills her husband because he's been beating her for 20 years,
correct,
and it's in self-defense, quite often the woman is still given a really harsh sentence and there's no leniency.
But so this is exactly the opposite of that, right? The man has killed the woman and got 99 years.
In 2014, which is really weird. But if a woman had killed the man in 99, she probably would have been executed. So he got 50 years. Yeah. If we looked at similar things at the time, or got life at the time. So there is an imbalance. There definitely is an imbalance. But we've seen there's an imbalance from person A to person B.
Yeah. I think that's to me more interesting. There doesn't seem
to be any rhyme or reason about, or there's no playbook that says, okay, this is what's happened, so we're going to sentence in this area. Every time we talk about this, we're shocked at how much time someone has or hasn't been given for whatever it is that they've done.
Every single time.
If I look at this in pure isolation, let's say they are in a relationship. He walks into the garage and shoots her in the back 4 times. That simple act in isolation, to me, doesn't warrant 50 years. That's straight out murder. You get life sentence for it. That's my non-legal mind working, right? I don't understand the ins and outs of it, but I kind of go, well, you get life for murder, and therefore you've murdered someone, you get life. I don't know why that would mean 50 years in that instance. There's nothing that kind of makes me go, it was horrendous, but 25 years would make sense. 50 years, what on earth?
Unless you said there are extenuating circumstances because she's been, abusing him for X period, but it doesn't sound like.
But that would talk it down, not up.
Exactly.
What talks it
from
up?
Life to 50 years.
Yeah.
From life to 50 years, right? So first time round, unless there was something. Yes, exactly. So here we have a second case where we're bringing in new evidence and we're able to try him again by saying this poor man is actually this terrible victim. And so instead of saying you poor thing, no, you're never coming out again. You're a danger to society.
I find it...
With all your musical theatre and your singing and your funereal carry-on.
Enough.
You're a danger.
And your maracas.
We don't want your kind around
your
here.
maracas at a funeral. We don't want
it. It is bizarre. It is bizarre.
I don't see it. I don't understand. I don't doubt that her family feel cheated by the whole thing. And I think regardless of their relationship with her, the fact that her money went to somebody who murdered her
looks manipulative. Looks like he's manipulated her. And I could understand 100% why they would feel that way. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying I kind of understand why they would be arguing that point. And I'm kind of okay with it.
And also, I want their money. You know,
well, of course
I want
they do.
the money.
Of course they do. But so
of course
does
I'm going to argue that.
But so does he, right? He kind of got himself into that situation because he wanted the money. You know, he left a job he loved.
No, I don't think that's true.
Really? Why do you reckon
I don't think he entered it. I think Bernie was actually just a kind person, and he felt sorry for her to start with because no one liked her. She was isolated, and her husband had just died. And I honestly think he was just being nice. And she, as Carla said, she seemed to be lighter. She seemed to be nicer.
If she didn't have the money and didn't take him on holidays, would he still do it?
But that happened later. That wasn't immediately.
Oh.
I think she chose him as well, though. It wasn't
100%
just he
she
chose
did.
her.
No, I'm okay with that. But what I'm saying is from the family's point of view, I don't think his intent was as pure and genuine as you might think. I think that he got amazing holidays, that he got to spend some time with someone he probably liked. But he didn't really have any claim to that money other than it was kind of nice to have. I think he was absolutely coerced into that with the reward of money. And
that could be why she got nastier and nastier towards him and more controlling.
Yeah.
Because, you know, she's like, well, fine, if you're going to take my money, you're going to earn it.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. But it is interesting. It's like, you know, you just said, Clarky, then, you know, that he wasn't really entitled to her money. And that's the thing where it does become quite interesting because who is entitled to her money? Do you know what I mean? It's like...
Well, so look at it this way. The family had to put up with her bad behaviour and she cut them off. He had to put up with her bad behaviour and he murdered her. Like, I can see why the family would be going, hang on a minute. You know, we just didn't talk to her for 4 years. He killed her.
Yeah,
who's worse here? And again, I don't think the money is the family's by any stretch. I kind of get annoyed at people who think that an inheritance is an entitlement. I just don't think that's the case. But
no.
I think the fact that he killed her kind of makes you go, well, hang on a minute. What was really going on here? And why couldn't he just walk away? Was she threatening to kill him? Probably not. Was she threatening to cut him off? Probably. But the fact that he can't have access to her money doesn't warrant murder. I don't see him as angelic.
But he did have access to her money. He had full access. He had power of attorney.
But what I'm saying,
she had given it over years earlier.
What I'm saying is, what's stopping him walking away then, rather than murdering her?
Nothing. He could have cleaned out the bank accounts and left, which tells you that his murdering her wasn't on his plan. You're right. If he wanted to leave, he could have taken everything.
But his relationship with her wasn't as genuine either, right? He wasn't. I don't think he was as much a victim as he would like us to think. I think that he was on a pretty bloody good wicket, but maybe got fed up with her at one point. Now, whether that's to do with dissociative behaviour from his uncle or whether he's just gone fuck and in the heat of the moment.
I can tell you, I live with my mother and it is difficult to live with a person who is constantly bitching at you, complaining about everything.
And yet you haven't shot her.
Not yet.
She's
no.
too quick.
See?
That's because we don't have guns in
That's
Victoria.
because you got a hip. Yeah.
That's because of Port Arthur. We've got gun control, so we don't. I can't shoot her.
But see again.
But she is infuriating, and I'm not beholden to her. You know, I've got my own financial stream, etc., and I'm not around her all the time. She'd created an environment where he had to be around her, on call, available to her all the time.
Also got a fuckload of money for it. I'm not saying that wouldn't drive you crazy. What I'm saying is if you choose to kill that person, you're not an angel.
No.
You know, like when we talk about coercive control in the reverse with genders, often the woman is in fear of her life if she leaves and therefore has no option but to murder the other person. He could have walked away at any moment.
Do you think, though, I mean, I guess the argument is that in that moment that he killed her, he wasn't planning to kill her. He probably wasn't even thinking about killing her prior. It was just the gun was there and he just behaved in that way. That's the argument.
Well, I think for me, I could see that happening without the dissociative behaviour of his uncle, right? And kind of to the point you were just talking about with your mum, there would totally be times where you just go,
the red mist
I'm
descends.
so fucking angry with you in this moment.
Yeah.
Of course you wouldn't do it, but I kind of understand
Because we don't have
that,
armadillos.
and it would almost be it'd almost be better though to be saying she pushed me one too many times. Like, she was horrible.
I was
to
provoked,
me.
Your Honour.
I would rather hear that than something about a dissociative behaviour from an uncle when at any moment you could have walked away. In the heat of the moment, she pushed my buttons one too many times and I got her.
I lost my shit.
Yeah. I think 25 years I'm comfortable with. 50 I'm not, and 99 I fucking what? I don't get it. I just don't get it. But I don't think he's as much of a victim as perhaps the movie that I haven't seen would have us believe. I mean, fuck, I've seen Weezer,
should be let off.
and Weezer needed she at least needed that slapping she got.
Good slap.
Yeah.
I was close. I didn't get quite. It's something like, I ain't crazy, Luann.
Yeah.
I've just been pissed off for 40 years.
Yeah.
Like
but
that.
there's a scene where they don't hit me, hit her. And that's
Bang.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I just was going to say that I think the defence attorney, whose name we don't know from the first trial,
I couldn't find it.
I was going to have a crack at them, but then having said that, he only got 50 years that time round.
Yeah.
Maybe all these do-gooders who got themselves involved in trying to reduce his sentence and then it all went badly wrong, maybe they should learn to shush, mind their own business and allow the justice system the first time round just to let it go.
I don't know.
Say, well, that's what happened.
I struggle. I don't know who I want to sentence.
Anyway, so I feel like I want to sentence the family to a little bit of greed, but for the murder. The murder changes it all for me. I kind of go, I think they just wanted the money, and a lot of people are like that, and it annoys me a bit. But once he murdered her, I kind of go, you know what? You weren't all you were
Up to be.
pretending to be. Yeah. Would she have made you power of attorney or even given you any money if she had have known you were going to murder? Just do what everyone else does and don't talk to her, walk away.
Sometimes things aren't tidy, and that's the problem with this. There's not a tidy...
It's not black and white, is
resolution.
Yeah.
No, and that's the problem.
No.
So, for instance, when you start off with this and him being painted the way he is, which is this man who initially you think, oh, what's he up to? Why is he hanging out with the dirty little old ladies?
Schmitty's doing Bob Down
darling.
faces.
I am.
But do you know what I mean?
Mr.
At that
Smiley,
point,
happy.
you think there might be
you've died. Let me sing a song.
Let's bring some glitter to your funeral.
But it was sort of, the point was sort of made a few times that he wasn't interested in women his own age. So at first you sort of think...
He wasn't interested in women.
Correct.
Let's put it that way.
Not sexually, but
Well,
maybe,
No. But the fact, but at first you're thinking, what's his motive to be only interested in and being so kind to the elderly
little
women?
old ladies.
Because they're all about
dirty.
to pop their
What were they?
clogs.
Dirty little old ladies.
Dirty little old lady, lols. It was supposed to be darling little old ladies. But then there's nothing in his character that I can see that suggested that it was terribly untoward.
Apart from murder.
I did see some, well, no, I'm talking about just the connection with old ladies to start with. But then I did read one place or heard one place, I think it was just somebody's testimony, was the fact that he particularly liked, she was the richest old lady in town. So there is that.
I think that's interesting because he kept going back, didn't he, despite the fact that she shut
Correct.
the door. Yeah.
Yeah. So, he did persevere, and I would imagine she would have taken quite a bit of perseverance. So it depends on what you want to believe. If you want to think that he was, a really good person, which the town folk really seemed to want to. Maybe he was a camp man who really didn't know
who loved
how
the
to
money.
But he loved the adoration of the older ladies because he really was, providing a service at the back end of people's lives that people need. And if he was so good at it, that I can understand why they adored him so much. So I guess he just used, he worked that audience because that were the people that he liked. I understand that. But, he just seemed, maybe he was a bit more lost than we give him credit for, and he was not so great. I don't know.
So sorry for those of you who are on the edge of your seats waiting for us to sentence someone. This is one of those really grey cases, I think.
A hung jury.
So it's a hung jury, I think. Yeah.
It wasn't intentional. I didn't think, oh, gee whiz, seeing as a trial by wine, I seem to stuff up, not the wine bit. Now I can't even get the trial bit either. Do you understand the concept, Carla?
No, there is definitely...
We're a year in. Do you get it?
Can someone message in and remind us
it's only
what the
3
greed
words.
punishment is? Because then I could probably sentence the family to some of that.
Yeah, okay. Someone send us a thing on our Facebook. That's Trial by Wine. or you can tweet us on Trial by Wine Podcast, or you can send us an email at trialbywine@gmail.com and tell us what you think Clarkie should, or how you think Clarkie should sentence the family for greed.
Yes.
Can you throw in some kind of incentive from your clown passions? It sounds like you're about to use your clown passions voice then.
We do have our merch. As long as you aren't somewhere in where international post costs far too much, Clarkie will very kindly, I'm sure, send you a Trial by Wine stemless wine glass.
The best suggestion gets the Trial by Wine glass for sure. The judge's decision is final.
All right, Swanny. Well, thanks very much. That was a good one.
Thank you.
And I might have to go and watch Bernie again.
We haven't seen
I might have
it.
to
Watch it
for
once.
shits and giggles.
Go and see it.
It's
for
worth
the-
watching.
the-
It's a good
the-
film. Yeah.
The old people.
The Weezer factor.
So some of those. Yes, that cranky old lady. Not even necessarily that character, but some of the old ones who are commentating on. I think they were really cute.
Yeah, nice.
A good one, Swanny. And as we say every week, and again, happy anniversary, guys.
Happy anniversary.
Miss you already.
Ciao, darling.
Ciao.
Ciao,
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Until
Ciao.
next time. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.